Welcome to a new video. Today I want to talk about a topic which I wanted to show before, and this is how to fight like Gandalf. So Gandalf, of course, is the very powerful Istari, a wizard in The Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits. And of course we know him from the excellent movies by Peter Jackson. Honestly, I was never a big fan of wizards in times when I was doing, role-play games. But Gandalf, especially thanks to the portrayal of Sir Ian McKellen, became one of my favorite fantasy characters. Now, what we see in the movies is that Gandalf fights with a longsword, Glamdring, and of course he's also using his Wizzard Staff, like a quarterstaff, so both weapons separately. But he also quite often uses his staff and the sword at the same time. And I was thinking about how practical is this? Because in the movies, it looks pretty badass. So I just wanted to give it a try, and I was experimenting with different things. Not how to use magic, but how to, smash in heads and cut through throats, just as Gandalf did it with the Goblin King down in Goblin Town in The Hobbit. So one of the techniques Gandalf uses down in Goblin Town is he uses a thrust with a sword and then another thrust with a staff, followed by a slash with the sword. And I think this technique is quite interesting. So as you can see here in these examples, this works quite well. And also instead of a slash, you can use a third thrust. So you use the first thrust with a sword for a threat, then you use the second thrust with the staff to create a distraction or even hit your opponent into the face. And when he's backing off, then you are probably free for a slash or another thrust with a sword. What you can also do is that you parry with the staff like you would do with a parry dagger, and then you cut then for an opening on the low line. But of course, there is the danger that the hand which is holding your staff, you don't have a basket hilt to protect your hand, so your hand is in danger that the weapon slides down or that you misjudge the distance or the cut of your opponent and he smacks you or hits you, cuts you in the face. What you can do then is to use the other staff end, if you hold it in the middle, like you would use a dirk. Because the quarterstaff or the staff in general is a heavier object, you can use this to clear the way for a cut. So you use what we also see what Gandalf is using. He uses a lot of these spinning and whirling techniques where he's fighting multiple opponents left and right and back and forth. And then he's using the staff to clear the way, to clear the path, to for example, make a deflection parry against an incoming cut from an opponent, or to cut away the guard of the opponent, and then you go for the opening with your sword. What also works nice is if you use the staff, hold it in the middle grip, and then you use it like a parry dagger against thrust. So you parry with inside half hanger, parry away the thrust, and then the opponent is open for your counter cut or thrust. So these techniques work, okay, but we have to keep in mind that a longsword and a staff together are still two kind of heavy objects. So Gandalf is an Istari, so kind of half god or magic creature. We don't want to go into the details too much now, but we can say that he probably has more than regular human power, despite he's looking like an old crouched man as Gandalf the Grey, but probably he has a little bit more of unnatural body physical power, so he can wield these objects quite well. And of course, Glamdring is an elven sword. Maybe it's much lighter than the claymore I use here. However, still, when we want to do kind of an adaptation to the real world or to the historical world, if we can use a longsword and a staff together, then we have to keep in mind these are two unwieldy objects. As one-handed weapons. The sword might be okay, but the staff with the end can get in your own way if you are not used to use it one-handed. So you can get stuck somehow, and then it is more hindering your motions, your body motions, your freedom of motion, than it helps you. So if we put the staff and under our armpit, then we can use this quite well in small motions, and it doesn't hinder our motion so much. So you can use this to deflect and to parry from left to right, and this is quite an interesting concept. I played with this already when using a spear together with a shield, and with a longsword in the other hand, this also works not too bad. So this is one possibility to use the long staff and to use its length to your advantage as a defensive weapon. So now, do we have historical references to the use of a longsword and a staff together? Honestly, I don't know. I'm not aware of any historical references of these combinations. Maybe people who know about medieval sources a little bit more, they might have something. I know that Fiore di Liberi is using a spear and then the dagger in his other hand, but this is a different kind of thing than staff and sword. Maybe there's something with staff and arming sword. I don't know. However, in the sources we use from the 18th century, we at least have something similar, which is using a backsword or spadroon or even smallsword together with a stick or a cudgel. And this reference goes back to Donald MacBain. So Donald MacBain used this in kind of one against many situation when he has a quarrel with some guys. I don't know. I think it was 7 guys or something like that. 5, 6, or 7 guys he was fighting using a sword and a cudgel together, or a stick as his parry weapon and deflecting weapon and second-hand weapon. And when we take his advices from his fencing material, then we can adapt a little bit and work some techniques out, as you can see here. And these are quite similar to what I try to do with the staff and the longsword. So you can use this kind of, dirk parry, but of course, again, you have to be aware that you don't get cut in the hand. You can use it like a parry dagger to parry away thrusts. And of course, you can do kind of a cross parry as well. But keep in mind, it is a stick, it is not a parry dagger, so you have to be very careful about your hand, so you don't get struck. But for quick motions, quick deflecting parries, this cudgel is kind of a nice thing, especially against thrusts. That works quite well to the inside and to the outside. And then, of course, you can do this with a spadroon or smallsword as well. And then you can use it against the backsword by using the smallsword and the stick together to have more power to parry a cut from the heavier weapon. And then you can go for a counter thrust or even use a stick to smash the head in of your opponent. So next thing to do, of course, after doing some technical experiments, is to try this out in sparring. For the purpose of safety and to make it a little bit easier, we use these kind of soft weapons, so a soft bow and a soft claymore, which is still, I think, 1.8 kilos, so heavy enough. And we used it against double sabers and also later mix it up a little bit. So in one round, I use a longsword and a staff, so typical Gandalf-like, and try out these things in sparring. And later I switch to a one-handed sword and try it out, the staff and the one-handed sword against the two-handed sword. And later we also do a little bit of sparring with a spadroon and the cudgel, according to Donald MacBain. So as you can see, I try here to use the kind of parries I showed in the technical videos. So I try to deflect the attacks of my opponent. I try to bind his weapon to get a free way to use the sword, and I also try to cover myself when I go in with a staff as a parry weapon. Yeah, and there you go. There was this kind of the Gandalf thrust. You maybe saw this, as I call it, Gandalf Hobbit Goblin Town thrust. So thrust with a sword, thrust with a staff, and then going for the kill. I have to say I was really surprised that this worked much better than I expected. I thought this was an interesting experiment, especially because I like Gandalf so much. And it looks cool on the screen, but honestly I did not think that this would be practical. And I would not say this is now a favorite combination of mine, but I was surprised that this, yeah, it kind of works. Of course, we have to see that here in Sparring, we use a very light staff compared to a real quarter staff or even a wooden hiking staff, and the kind of wizard staff Gandalf uses. However, the soft claymore, as I call it, is still kind of heavy. As I said, 1.8 kilos. So this is something you have to wield with one hand. So this was surprisingly interesting as an experiment. I have to say that also I was surprised how well the staff was able to parry the cuts of the two-handed sword, especially when I was putting the staff end under my armpit. So I had a lot of a good lever here, you know, to parry this away. So this is also kind of interesting. And yeah, then of course we have the spadroon with a stick, which we are more used to use in combat, and yeah, that was also quite kind of interesting. And maybe you can see it yourself. I realized during sparring that many of the things that I did with the cudgel and the spadroon were also working with the longsword and the staff. Yeah, I think that was kind of fun. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little experiment. Yeah, as I said, let me know in the comments what you think about it, and see you in the next video.